Hey, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to week six. Digital history. It's been a good course so far. I really enjoyed working on the mapping assignment. It's something totally new, something I've never done. So, really, it's been a good course. I've enjoyed it. The focus of my project is the post World War II environment in Indochina and the United States' role in regard to mutual security. So what I'm looking at is as the United States navigated those first 5 or 10 years post World War II, the world was we had a lot of problems across the globe, and the United States decision makers, with Truman and Marshall, and the Truman administration, took an approach that started with the Truman Doctrine and then later with Truman's Point 4 or 4-point speech, that the way to foster peace was through nation building, and through developing military and economic capabilities. The logic being that if a country had economic viability and the ability to defend itself, and if they were freedom-loving people, so implied in that is kind of a democratic structure, that then would foster peace and would thwart the spread of communism. Communism basically spread and fed on poverty and unhappiness and hunger, and if you could stop that, then you could stop communism. Hence the Marshall Plan, where George C. Marshall proposed to basically flood Western Europe with money, develop their economy, and then you could limit the risk that communism had from spreading east to west in Europe. And it worked. So my goal in this project is to focus that same kind of thought process into post-World War II Indochina, which includes Vietnam. So the overarching goal of this project is kind of a twofold goal. The first goal is to just kind of share and educate the deeper roots of American involvement in Vietnam. The Vietnam War itself, which started in the mid-1960s, the roots of it are kind of nebulous. Like, how did the United States get involved in Vietnam? How did the Vietnam War start? And again, generally you get to the mid-1960s and there's some, operations begin, but how did that start? What I am focusing on here are those roots that go back to the Second World War, and then particularly in 1950, with the French trying to recolonize Indochina, and the United States involved in that balancing act between mutual security and our French allies. So the first step here is just exposing the deeper roots in American involvement in Vietnam. And then the second part of this goal, second part of the twofold goal, is to kind of dig into that mutual security aspect. And in this particular case, you have the kind of the grand idea of mutual security. The United States is going to help freedom-loving peoples gain independence, build economic power, develop their military, develop kind of a democratic structure. But in the case of the French, they wanted to recolonize. And so there's this dichotomy of freedom-loving peoples in America trying to sponsor mutual security, and the French wanting to put the Vietnamese back under the shackles of colonialism. There's a complete dichotomy, diametrically opposed ideas. But the French kind of put the United States over a barrel because we needed their help in Europe. And the French said, we're not going to help you in Europe. We're not going to help you defend Europe. We're not going to be part of this big coalition, kind of a pre-NATO alliance, where we're going to work together to defend Western Europe against Soviet invasion unless you help us in Indochina. So we slowly got pulled into this situation where we're equipping the French with U.S. military equipment to help fight the Vietnamese. So there's a real dichotomy there and a real problem. And from that becomes the idea, and this isn't unique to Vietnam. We had military advisors, we call MAG teams, military advisor and assistant groups. One was in Indochina, one was in Taiwan, one was in Korea. They had them all over the place. But these are the early ideas of sending U.S. military members over to advise and assist foreign forces. Now, in the case of Korea, Taiwan, we were working with the Taiwanese and the Koreans directly. In the case of Vietnam, we were working with the French. So a much different example there. But because of that, our relationship with the Vietnamese deteriorated greatly, because the Vietnamese looked at the United States as kind of the leaders of freedom and independence from colonialism. We broke away from colonialism, and the Vietnamese saw us as kind of leading the way in that. When we turned around and supported colonial French, it really hurt our relationship. So that's the goal here. Kind of look at those two areas. This project matters because we still do these things today. I spent about 18 months of my military career advising and assisting in Afghanistan. I was on an embedded training team in Helmand for a year. I spent 6 months with NATO in Kabul doing and advise and assist missions. So I've seen us do these exact same things. And you could take examples of Vietnam with our military advise and assist groups there with what I experienced in Afghanistan. You could put them together and they'd be almost exactly the same. The same approach, the same intent. Whether it's the Truman Doctrine or driven by the Bush Doctrine after 9/11, we, as a country, we haven't really stopped and looked at, as a nation, as a military, how effective that really is. And they go deep into that, but that's kind of what why this project matters. We should stop and think about how do these kind of processes work, and do they work? And we can see that in Vietnam and Afghanistan and Iraq, we didn't have a lot of luck. A couple of takeaways from me. The more I look into this, the more interesting it becomes. The more complex it is. The trying to understand the dynamics that the United States policymakers and decision makers had to kind of grapple with. You know, do we help the French? How we allowed the French to put us in that situation? I don't fully understand that part, but they did, and we really felt strongly that if Vietnam fell, if the French lost, then all of the Far East would fall. This also happens with when China fell to the Chinese nationalist government fell to the communist government. You have the Korean War. All this is going on in the Far East. Now you have this problem with Vietnam. I'm also the idea that we didn't have a counterinsurgency doctrine or process for counterinsurgency up to this point is also, kind of an amazing reality that we just didn't know anything about counterinsurgency as a doctrinal process. Okay, I'm at my 7 minutes out. It goes quick. Good luck, everybody. Thank you. Enjoy your course.